Hi, everybody. So we're going to continue with our week 4 lesson. This is going to be what I'm going to refer to as section 3.3, which is two-step inequalities. So last time we talked about one-step inequalities, how you solve them kind of the same way you solve a one-step equation. The only difference is you have an inequality symbol and then you graph your answer. Here's some reminders on how to do your graph on a number line. You're going to put a circle above the number that you're graphing. And again, your variable has to be alone before you can graph. You can't graph based off of the starting question. It has to be just a variable on one side and then a number by itself on the other. You're going to put a circle above that number. If you're looking at one of these symbols without the bar, you'll use an open circle. If it does have a bar, you'll use a closed circle. Then to figure out which direction you shade, you're going to look at the inequality symbol like it's a mouth. If it's eating the variable, shade to the right. If it's eating the number, shade to the left. Another thing that we talked about last time is that if you multiply or divide both sides of the inequality by a negative to get your variable by itself, you have to flip the direction of the symbol. So here's an example. It's a one-step inequality like we learned last time. It's negative 4x is less than 16. This is multiplication because the number is touching the variable. In order to get my variable alone, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 4. Okay. These are going to go away. And I'm going to be left with x. But what I need to do is I need to flip the direction of my inequality. Okay, and that is because I divided both sides by a negative. It works if you multiply both sides by a negative as well, and then you would just get your answer on the other side. So this is the inequality that you would be left with. Once you've got your variable by itself, then you can graph. Some of you guys were trying to graph without solving first. You can't do that because you don't know what the solution is. You're graphing the solution, okay? Your circle has to go above the answer. Here's the answer once the variable is alone. Once I have this, I can graph. So in the corner of your slides, you're going to see little reminders on how to do your graph. You're going to have some things you can drag and drop to do your graph, but before you graph, you have to solve. Here is a simple one step. This is what we did last time. So it says x minus 1 is greater than or equal to 9. I want the x by itself, which means I need to get rid of the number that's near it. So I do the opposite of what I see. The opposite of subtracting 1 is to add 1. I'll do it once to the left, once to the right. These will cancel out. X is now alone. X is now alone. And then I'm going to copy down my inequality symbol and then my answer. Space this out a little bit. 9 plus 1 on the right gives me 10. And notice how my starting inequality has a bar underneath. I want to make sure that my ending inequality has a bar underneath as well. To do that, very simply, just underline it. Highlight the text and then click the underline feature. Okay? Once my variable is alone, then I can graph it. I know I need to put a circle above positive 10. Here's positive 10. To determine whether it's an open or closed, I find the type of symbol that matches. So this has a bar underneath, which means I want to use a closed circle. I put it above the number. And then to figure out whether I shade to the right or the left, I'm going to look at this like it's a little mouth. Which side is it eating? Is it eating the variable or the number? Well, it's eating the variable in this case, and when it eats the variable, you shade to the right. So I'm going to use this one and shade to the right. Can't quite see it because it's really long. Maybe I'll make it a little shorter. There we go. Now we can see all of it. There's my final answer. Okay, here's another one step. So just getting some practice in for some one steps, easing into the new lesson. We'll do some two steps in a moment. X minus 5 is greater than 2. Okay, well I need to do the opposite of subtracting 5 because that's the operation happening with the x. Well, the opposite of subtracting 5 is to add 5. I do that to the left. I do that to the right. These cancel out. And I'm left with x on the left. I bring down my inequality symbol. And then on the right, I combine these two. 2 plus 5 gives me 7. Okay, so now I can go ahead and graph this now that the variable is alone. There's no bar under my symbol, so I use an open circle above the number 7. It's eating the variable again, so again, I'm going to shade to the right. If you want to make the arrow a little shorter for ones like this, you can. You don't have to, though. I'll be able to tell which way it's going based off of the arrow I see that was left down here. And also the fact that, it's going out towards this way. Okay, now here is our first two-step inequality. And right off the bat, it probably looks more complicated than the last one. But remember, you always look on the side that has the variable. So I've got two numbers to get rid of. I have a positive 5 and a negative 1 that's touching the variable. You always get rid of the number that's not touching the variable before taking care of what is. So I want to get rid of this plus 5 first. So it's addition, so I want the opposite. I want to do subtraction, and I'm going to subtract the 5. I do it once to the left, I do it once to the right. These go away. So what I'm left with in my next step, x isn't alone, I still have a negative 1x, and then I bring down my inequality symbol, and then I combine these two. Negative 2 minus 5 gives me negative 7. Always double check your mental math using some form of a calculator. And then I want to make sure that my symbol maintains a bar underneath. So I'm going to highlight this and select the underline feature. Okay, we're not done though. The x isn't by itself. There's still a negative 1 that's touching this variable. So remember, if a number touches a variable, that means multiplication. The opposite of multiplying is to divide. I have to divide the left side by negative 1, and I have to divide the right side by negative 1. That's going to give me, and you know what, I'm going to run out of space, so what I'm going to do is just shrink the size of this font a little bit with the hopes that that gives us enough space to continue. I think it does. We'll be able to see it well enough. So I've got the x on the left. I've got my inequality symbol, but you remember that rule that we talked about? If you multiply or divide both sides by a negative, you got to flip the direction of that symbol. So it's not going to be facing, the open mouth isn't going to be facing the right anymore. It's going to be facing the left. It's going to be like this. Okay, so make sure that you're flipping that symbol. Okay, and this also has an underline. And then on the right, I just divide. Negative 7 divided by negative 1 is positive 7. Okay, so here's my final inequality, and this is what I want to graph. So I've got a bar under my symbol, so I want the closed circle above 7. And it's eating the variable again, so I want it to go to the right. Done. So just keep that negative rule in mind. If you multiply or divide both sides by a negative, you have to flip the direction of your symbol. Here's another one. 2x minus 3 is less than 9. So again, I've got two things near the x that I need to get rid of. A 2 that's touching, and a minus 3, which is not. You always want to get rid of what's not touching. So I want to get rid of that minus 3. To get rid of it, I add 3. Once to the left, once to the right. These cancel, and I'm left with the following. I still have a 2x. I bring down my inequality symbol, and then 9 plus 3 gives me 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, now to get rid of the 2. Again, if it's touching the variable, it means multiplication. Opposite of that is to divide by 2. One's to the left, one's to the right. I have to shrink my font again. And then I'm left with x is less than 12 divided by 2 is 6. Notice how I didn't have to flip my symbol this time. That's because when I divided here, it was by a positive. Okay, you only flip the symbol when you multiply or divide by a negative. All right, no bar under my symbol, so I want an open circle above the number 6. And then less than means I'm shading to the left. And you know what? I'm going to have to shrink the size of this arrow so you can actually see the answer and the graph at the same time. Okay. Here's another example of a two-step inequality. X divided by -2 plus 1 is greater than or equal to 5. So I've got two operations near the X. I have division of -2 and addition of 1. Get rid of the 1 first because it's not directly touching the X. See how these two are touching? You want to get rid of the 1 first. So to do that, I'm going to subtract 1. Oops. Subtract 1. Once to the left, once to the right. These cancel. And I'm left with the following. X divided by -2 is greater than or equal to 5 minus 1 gives me 4. Oops, I don't want the 4 underlined. There we go. Okay, so it's easiest, I think, to write the division like this. If you're typing, don't worry too much if when you get down to this step, it doesn't look how it looked in the original question. When I design this, I can kind of take my time and make it look nice. But this means the same thing. X is being divided by -2, X is being divided by -2. And then that's the next thing that I need to get rid of. Well, the opposite of division is to multiply times -2 on the left times -2 on the right. These are going to cancel. I'm going to have to shrink my font again. You guys may have to do that when you're doing your work too. You may run out of space. Here, let's do 18. Let's do 14 actually. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm left with X, which is now by itself. Notice what I did here. I multiplied by a negative. So I gotta flip the direction of my symbol and make sure that it has an underline when you do this, okay? On the right, 4 divided by -2 is -2. Oops, I don't want it to be red. I want it to be blue. I think that's the same color. All right, so now that X is alone, this is my final inequality, and I can graph this. Closed circle because there's a bar underneath my symbol. And then if I look at the inequality symbol like it's a mouth, it's eating the number. That means I shade to the left. Done. One more before we call it a day with this lesson. X divided by 7 minus 2 is less than -3. Okay, so again, I've got two operations near the X. I have division of 7 and subtraction of 2. I want to get rid of the 2 first because it's not touching. Opposite of subtracting 2 is to add 2. Once to the left, once to the right. These go away. They cancel. They're opposites. I still have an X divided by 7 on the left is less than -3 plus 2, which gives us -1. Okay, so I still got to get rid of this division of 7. What's the opposite of division? Well, that's multiplication. So I multiply both sides by 7. Okay, again, I'm going to shrink my font. I'll do 14 again. These 7s are going to cancel. Let me space it out a little bit. There we go. That looks a little bit neater. All right, so I have X on the left, which is now by itself. I don't have to flip my symbol this time because I didn't multiply by a negative, I multiplied by positive. And on the right, my product, -1 times 7, is just -7. No bar under my symbol, so I use an open circle above the number. It's eating the number, if you look at it like a mouth. which means I shade to the left. And I'm going to shrink the size of it so we can see it on the slide. Okay, and that is pretty much it for 2 steps. So again, to recap, your variable has to be alone before you can graph. To do that, you do the inverse of the operations you see happening to the x. Always take care of what's furthest away first before you take care of what's touching. Use the table in the corners to help you do your graph. As is normal, if you run into any issues, leave comments or email me if you have questions. And then our homework for the week, Wednesday, will be the slides that I'm uploading. And then on Friday, I'll send you a worksheet. It'll have 4 inequalities that you have to solve, 4 questions, okay? All right, guys, that's it for today. Take care.